So the just move over a little bit. So Panini World Cup design has been released. This is probably the biggest soccer product of the year. It was one of the biggest soccer products for 2018. We saw the Mbappe coming out of that product, one of the biggest cards, I think, probably the catalyst for a lot of soccer cards. Uh, Based on the checklist, there's 300 players on last year, the 2018 checklist. So there was roughly between for the popular teams, it was between 10 to 12 players. So like Argentina, Portugal, England, all those players. There was between 10 to 12 players, and then some of the less popular teams there were 8 to 10. So I think for the US, I don't know. I'll be interested to see how Panini goes about this because like last World Cup I think the US, they weren't in it, but I think they only had the Landon Donovan, I believe. I'm actually not 100% sure if they had any cards on that checklist. They may not have, but either way, I think with this upcoming checklist, I wouldn't be surprised if they change it a little bit and they add more of the US players, like if they add like a 15 to 20 checklist for the US players, or even I don't know, maybe the starting 11 and then also like 5 to 10 maybe bench players that I think are important. I don't know. I mean, I think it's a very interesting kind of topic because I've talked to people who are into soccer cards and soccer stickers in the past, and they said they didn't really care about Prizm, which, like, for me, that was kind of one of the main topics that I was talking about with soccer cards when I was first getting into making the content about soccer cards and looking into soccer cards. It was Prizm for me. It was always Prizm. It was 2014 World Cup Prizm, which has the Neymar. He has cards before that, but like 2014 was the first Prizm World Cup product. Um, there was World Cup products before that, but there wasn't a Prizm. So then 2018 comes out. There's the Mbappe. I mean, there's still even the Messi and Ronaldo. I think are still you see like autographs and high value cards from that product. So like I'm not sure they didn't come out with the only US card they came out with like sort of the marketing that I've seen is they came out with a Pulisic Ricardo Pepe uh dual autograph. So I actually Pepe is kind of on the fringe of making the team or not. So it's going to be interesting to see where, if I had to guess, they probably made the checklist like when the US was like way early on in the year. Like Pepe was one of the best players on the team, like when he first made his debut. Not as much kind of as we've been going on. He's a player that's kind of bounced around a little bit in Europe. Kind of, I wasn't really expecting it. I'm not exactly sure why. Like you see players in soccer, like not necessarily only American players, but like in general, you'll see players move around in leagues. Uh, and sometimes it's an interesting kind of conversation. Like for you do see players like Erling Haaland who make the jump from the Bundesliga to the Premier League and do great, but then you also see players like Jadon Sancho, and he was on Dortmund and then he goes to Manchester United, and now he has been kind of a bust a little bit. So like I don't know if maybe a move for him would have been going to either a smaller Premier League team or staying in the Bundesliga a little bit longer, or going to Italy or going to one of the smaller leagues before going to the EPL. Now there are a lot of US players in the EPL right now. Pepe didn't exactly, he switched teams and he switched teams again, and it hasn't really been as smooth of a process as many people within the United States probably expected it to be. Like Brendan Aronson, for example, he sort of had I think he had the trajectory that a lot of people expected and that a lot of people saw. Like, I don't know exactly what I would imagine if I'm Brendan Aronson, I probably move to a better Premier League team, or, I don't know, Leeds United, like and him and Tyler Adams, maybe they even make it where it's like, they lead the team somewhere. I don't know. Premier League is like, they had like that super league that was trying to form. That's basically what the Premier League is now. Like if you look at how much money the Premier League team spent on free agents and getting people during the transfer window, it's like astronomically larger than the second largest league. So I don't know. I mean, I think, like I said, it'll be interesting to see which American players end up being on this checklist. I mean, obviously you have your Weston McKennies, your Pulisics, you Brendan Aronson, the Tyler Adams, hopefully Serginho Dest. But then there's kind of maybe fringe players that, who knows? I don't know. I think it's going to be, I don't know when they're going to release the checklist. From what I've seen, Blowout has the release date for later on in this year. So I think it was early November, which I would this is sort of what I was thinking. Like Panini, like they should be coming out with this product before the World Cup. So that way it's sort of being released during that World Cup time and it's being opened during the World Cup. The World Cup's, gonna last obviously a little bit longer. It's gonna last probably about a month. But still, like I think there is an opportunity for these releases to come out strategically around the sport's biggest events. And if it's like if you're trying to brand the product as the biggest product, it should be coming out when the biggest event is going on for the sport. Which, for the World Cup, obviously, that's going to be in Qatar. It's going to be in November into December, which they had to switch it. The whole the whole World Cup in Qatar situation is like super sus to me. Like super crazy that they are actually it's been just all the headlines coming out. It's just been an absolute nightmare. Like even from the beginning, like they were the World Cup actually should have happened over the summer, but it didn't because obviously you can't play soccer in 150-degree heat in the middle of the desert. So that's why it's going to be going on during the winter. US playing in that bracket with England and I forget the other two teams. I think it's I think it's Poland, I think. I forget. I don't remember off the top of my head who who else is in that, but the I think the U.S. play. I think the U.S. plays England either on Thanksgiving or the day after Thanksgiving. So that's going to be like a must watch moment, I think, for everybody within the United States who's into soccer. I remember the 2018 World Cup. I had recently turned 21, and the games were on during the day. And I remember going to the bars and watching the games. It was really kind of interesting. It's like one of the, or no, sorry, it would have been 2014, not 2018. They didn't make the World Cup in 2018. 2014, still just recently turned 21. I was thinking in my head, like 2018, that was only 4 years ago. There's no way that I just turned 21 4 years ago. But either way, it was really interesting, and I'm super excited for the World Cup this year. Also, the jerseys. I just want to point it out. The jerseys are good. Like I think a lot of the people online on Twitter, which granted I don't know why I would be getting my opinions from Twitter, but either way, Twitter hates the jerseys. I think Instagram hates the jerseys. The jerseys are good. I just want to say that first and foremost. And I think down the road, people are going to definitely agree with me that the jerseys are good. I think people are complaining about them because they're going to complain about any jersey that comes out. I rarely see jerseys come out and people not complain about them. The white jerseys are great. The white jerseys I think are phenomenal looking. Like they look very similar to what they just had, which is another great design. The blue are okay. Let's maybe get that out of the way as well. The blue ones are okay. I wish that they had incorporated red a little bit into the design. I wish it maybe even had been like the camo sort of thing with the blue instead of black. They had done either white or red. I don't know. These Nike people, and I think the one thing that's interesting about the US jerseys is that like people are talking about them. That's like one thing that I think is a little bit underrated when it comes to marketing and jerseys and all this type of stuff. The jerseys are the worst when no one cares. That's sort of how I see a lot of these types of announcements. Like if nobody was talking about these jerseys, then no, and then that would have been a bigger fail, I think, than coming out with these jerseys that everyone says they don't like. But like I said, they're good. They're good jerseys. The white jersey is really good looking. So I don't know what people are complaining about, but either way, jerseys are good. I love this design as well. I mean, it's kind of across the board. They sort of have kept the same sort of. It's very similar to Topps flagship in a way where the design it has like the chromium border. It has a lot of the like the colored elements all throughout the design. I like the design. I mean, I think actually this was one design that I think a lot of people really liked. I put the design out on Twitter, and that actually was one of my best performing tweets in quite some time. But people really seem to like the design as well. So I think it's going to be very fun to see the checklist. If from what I'm seeing, it's early November is the release date. Blowout has an early November release date. So, hopefully we get a checklist at some point in October. We should probably get a checklist before the product comes out, I hope. And it's going to be, like I said, the strategy, I think, behind who ends up getting on the checklist, if you're an American, or whoever else they choose. I think the American part of the checklist is obviously going to be the part that I'm most interested in. The rest of the teams, I don't really. It's not that I don't necessarily care, but the American checklist is obviously the one that I've been following these American players, and this is sort of like I think the 2026 World Cup is going to be much more important than this World Cup that's coming up. 2026 is when all these players are really going to be in their prime age, and by the next World Cup, I think most of them will be sort of not past their prime, but they're going to be over the hill a little bit. So like this first World Cup is sort of like a teaser for what I think the team could do in the future. Do I think that they're going to win the World Cup? No, probably not. Do I think that they're going to make it out of the group stage? I would say I hope they make it out of the group stage into the knockout stage. If they can do that, I would say that this World Cup will be a success for the United States. And I think I don't know. I mean, it's going to come down to, I think, Pulisic, how he plays, McKinney, all these players that are playing in the top leagues are going to be extremely important. And I think we're seeing sort of the first stages of where American soccer is going to go in the future. Because I've talked about this in the past. It's the MLS itself is only about 25 years old. Like I think they had their 25th anniversary either last year or the year before that. So there was no, when Pulisic or McKinney or any of these players were younger, they really own their only options were to go overseas. Like, and maybe not them specifically, but if we're looking at Clint Dempsey, for example, maybe like players from that sort of generation, their really only option was to go overseas somewhere to play in a league. Like the MLS wasn't really a good sustainable option for any of these players. But if you look at a lot of the players in the generation that are either playing at smaller leagues now or playing in bigger leagues, most of them came through the MLS. So I think, as you see the MLS start to grow, as you see soccer in America start to grow, you're going to see better athletes gravitate more towards soccer than maybe football. There's still obviously increases in the contracts of basically every other major sport. But I think what you're going to probably see is more players gravitating towards soccer because they see, you know, I think what players, when they have enough talent, when they're good at soccer at like, and this is kind of crazy, but when they're good at soccer at between 12 to 14 years old, there's probably scouts and people who are advising them what they should be doing at that age. Like for Pulisic, he went over to Dortmund, he went over to Germany at like 15 years old. So it's like, there's options for players now at 14, 15, 16, 17 years old to play in the MLS and then kind of take the next step. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the MLS because you do see players coming over here. You have Gareth Bale who's now playing for LA. It's not just a league where people are going from; it's people are coming to. Now, Gareth Bale, I think, is one of the good examples of a player who isn't at the towards the end of his career coming over here. Wayne Rooney, for example, was a player who sort of was at the end of his career when he ended up coming over here. He's the coach now for DC United, which I think is also really good. I don't know. I just think American soccer, it's always something that's growing. And World Cup is going